Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. For the next half hour, we have a panel of experts assembled ready to deal with the topic that we believe is of interest to you, criminal law and DUI. So a lot of ground to cover. A couple of reminders. You can join our conversation. That information at the bottom of your screen all throughout the program tonight. And Hollis Wright makes available attorneys standing by live throughout the show to take your calls. So if you have something and you'd like some free legal advice, the opportunity for the next half hour to pick up the phone and give them a call. And those conversations take place off the air, so an opportunity to speak with an attorney standing by from the firm of Hollis Wright. Managing partner of the firm, Josh Wright, leading our conversation. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too. Hope you are having a great holiday season. Everything going well?
Yeah, all well. You?
We're doing great, doing great. Unfortunately, sometimes during the holiday season we deal with criminal-related issues, DUIs, those types of things, but we're going to address them tonight because even though there are things that happen during these holiday seasons. We need to be able to make sure we're providing good advice to people that have been in these circumstances. We are lucky, as usual. We have Brett Bloomston on, who's got his own firm here in town. He is one of our local celebrities and is the guy in criminal contexts that you go to. And when anybody asks me, and not only is he a personal friend, but he's a great lawyer, anybody asks me, hey, I got a criminal-related issue, who do I go to? Brett's the guy. And everybody seems to say that because he's one of the real popular guys that have come down from a group of great lawyers and learned a lot about being a great criminal lawyer. So
that's quite an introduction.
Well, not only that, but you are a local celebrity, which I like to have you on.
As always, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak to folks and to come on your show.
Well, we could just jump off into this about the difference between criminal law and civil law like we've done in the past, but let's talk about just some things that have dominated the media as of late. And I want to talk a little bit about statute of limitations and whether or not some things can be brought at a later date, if we can talk about that. I know that this issue with Chief Justice Roy Moore has been significant in the media. Some of these allegations took place a long time ago. We're talking about 30, 40 years ago. Is there the potential for criminal prosecution related to those issues? And I'm not just pointing the finger at Chief Justice Moore at all. I'm talking about just in general, those types of claims.
Well, these claims are not new or not specific to Judge Moore. We've heard about these type of allegations, repressed memories that come back, or victims that have been unwilling to testify or come forward, and that's a big issue in the law. Statute of limitations are something that prevent cases from going forward. In other words, the statutes say that after a certain period of time, the cases should not be brought. The allegations against Judge Moore are sex offenses, and they can be classified as misdemeanor sex offenses, or they could be classified as felony sex offenses. And that would determine whether the statute of limitation is 1 year, which it would be for a misdemeanor, 5 years for your typical felony prosecution. However, there are some jurisdictions, Alabama being one of them, that if it is a child sex case and the child being less than 16 years old, there is no statute of limitations. So if there's credible evidence against Judge Moore or anyone, a prosecutor could bring those old cases up, and it could be 30 or 40 years, as long as the prosecutor believes that they can make a case. We could see a prosecution. Frankly, I don't think it's likely that we'll see a criminal prosecution in Judge Moore's case, but it's one of those allegations that it's hard to recover from regardless of guilt or innocence.
Yeah, and in the civil context, a lot of times the criminal side, it kind of works with the civil side on issues of can you bring suits here or there, when can you prosecute, what are the statute of limitations. For individuals that are under the age of 21, generally you've got the statute of limitations starts when you turn 21. So then there are statute of reposes where you can't file suits after 20 years. So there are certain restrictions on the civil side too if somebody was ever to file a civil case. In a context like that, again, we're not just talking about Judge Moore, we're talking in general, those types of claims. But there are potential civil consequences too, probably aged out at this stage. But all important issues that you got to take a look at when you're evaluating whether or not there are criminal and both civil implications.
How do you think the landscape, both of you are relatively young, but this topic seems kind of the landscape seems to have changed in the last few months and years, but certainly, if you go back 20 years, the way office behavior, what was acceptable, it's kind of changing. What do you think is going to be the long-term effects? And not only talking about the cases happening here, it seems like every day in Hollywood there's another accusation, another claim brought by someone. Kind of, if you could speak to that, how do you think that's going to change workplace behavior? Sure.
I think we're seeing Harvey Weinstein and others being investigated for criminal behavior that took place quite a long time ago. Mm-hmm. That is going to be something that we see more frequently. Hopefully, with aggressive prosecution. And I have, as a criminal defense attorney, I have no problem with aggressive prosecution for sexual offenses towards women, towards children. Mm-hmm. Frankly, we just can't deal with those issues. And I'm optimistic, and we all are, that with aggressive prosecution, we may see more stringent workplace changes. We may see folks dealing away in civil context with contracts of basically hush money and allowing for folks to basically pay away victims. Right. So we can only hope for some widespread changes.
Mm-hmm. And I think, this highlights this concept of workplace equality. And there are a lot of prognosticators that have said over decades that we have workplace equality, but I think the recent Me Too push and emphasis highlights maybe that has not been the case. And there are always those that will take advantage of somebody when they're at a low point and they need to advance from a career perspective, need to advance from a financial perspective, and will capitalize and take advantage of that. And my hope is through this whole process, as Brett said, optimistically, I think lawyers in general, especially those that handle these type of cases, recognize that we'll have better workplace equality as we move forward, which is the way we probably should have it.
We have to step aside, but can we answer this when we come back? And that is your advice, because both of you lead firms, you have employees yourself, it's men and women working together in the workplace. I would like to know your advice for bosses and for leaders in the workplace, maybe when we come back. Can we get there?
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a break right now. Our first break of the evening. As we do so, a couple of reminders. Would love to have you join the conversation. This is how you can do so. Also, find the firm on Facebook. Search the term Hollis Wright and you'll find them there on Facebook. On Twitter, it's Hollis_Wright. A great educational and informational resource right there on social media. Great the way the firm uses that. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back into the attorneys, talking about criminal law and covering all kinds of topics under that umbrella. As we welcome you back, a reminder, attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live right now to speak with you. That conversation will take place off the air, but if you call that number, you see there on your screen the opportunity right now to speak with an attorney from Hollis Wright. Whenever we went to break, talking about all of it seems like every day, if not every week, a Hollywood star, even folks here locally, sexual assault, all sorts of different claims of harassment and in the news. I'm kind of curious as to what your advice would be to bosses out there, because there does seems to be a shift taking place. So your advice to bosses and those folks who have women and men working together in their workplace, should this be something, use this as an opportunity to address what really is kind of an uncomfortable conversation maybe?
Absolutely, and I believe our federal government addresses EEOC claims and provide the framework and the regulation that an office is to run by. There has to be folks in human resources that deal with these allegations. There's got to be insulation so that a victim can feel comfortable about going to a safe person in the business to report such allegations. There are plenty of regulations in place. Common sense is also a good direction. It's amazing what we see in our fields of inappropriate emails and text and things that come from educated hierarchy. I mean, folks that are high up in companies sending out inappropriate emails and things that are sexual in nature. So use your common sense, but also you have to follow those federal guidelines to stay out of trouble.
Yeah, and I would just add that I'm a big believer that education and training, having a policy in place, those are all critically important. And then, if you have a no tolerance policy for that type of stuff and you make it known, it makes it easier to manage internally with, for example, our firm. We've got an anonymous reporting ability at our law firm that someone anonymously can report an issue associated with a lawyer, a staff member, whatever. I feel like that is another, if you will, step in the process to be able to make sure that we have the environment that promotes equality, that promotes, a sound family environment of where people want to work and respect the people they work with. So, I think this national movement is a good thing, because I think ultimately it's going to make the workplace a better place to be. But I know, and Brett, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I know you see a lot in your business, this concept of false reporting, and how false reporting can devastate the personality of someone, can devastate their stature when it may be proven out down the road that something was not accurate. I know you see it in divorce context too, and talk a little bit about that though, because I know that's kind of a significant issue.
Absolutely. One of the hardest cases that I will ever have to work on are false reports and false allegations of child sex abuse or the like. The Alabama statutes give an absolute defense to crimes such as murder. It is legal to kill someone if you act in self-defense or if you're acting in defense of property. However, there is no defense, and we don't want a defense, to child sex cases. So if you're abusing a child sexually, there is no defense to that. And oftentimes we see false allegations that are used in a divorce context, for example, or a child custody example. Recently, I had a case where a mother wanted to move their child outside of the jurisdiction. And under Alabama divorce law, the only way to do that is under an extreme circumstance, such as the child is being sexually abused by the spouse. And the child was then reported as a victim of sex abuse. And again, those are the cases that keep me up at night, because I sincerely believe that the system is being manipulated a bit in using those sex offenses and those sex allegations to further a position in a civil case or a domestic case.
Let's talk just for a minute about, let's kind of step back if we can into general criminal law. I've enjoyed this part of this conversation because it's what we see in the headlines every day. But all right, let's assume there's someone on the couch that has just been arrested for some event. What process do they generally go through, and when do they need to get a lawyer involved to be able to manage kind of what's happening to them?
Well, it may sound self-serving, but the sooner you can get a lawyer, the better off you're going to be. I tell my clients, even sitting in my conference room, you don't have to hire me, but hire a lawyer. Yeah. Get somebody involved immediately. Most folks don't have the benefit of contacting a lawyer before they are charged. But if there is any investigation, if there's a business card from the sheriff's office left on your door, it's best to contact an attorney before any statements are made, before any contact is made to law enforcement, because a lawyer can help protect your rights and insulate you from what may be something incriminating that you do, not willingly, but without good advice, it's hard to keep that from happening.
So how does the process itself work? All right, somebody's arrested, they contact a lawyer. What do they expect from that point moving forward? And I know it will change depending on whether or not this is a simple, traffic event. If it's a misdemeanor, it's a felony. I understand that concept will change, but in general terms, what should somebody expect?
Sure, and like you addressed, the process is different. I represent folks in city courts in Birmingham and surrounding areas, but also represent folks in state court and in federal court. The process is a little bit different in each of those different jurisdictions, but generally you're arrested, you're released on a bond, and then the court process starts. Generally, an arraignment, which is where you're told what your charges are, a preliminary hearing, which is a hearing used by the courts to determine whether there's enough probable cause to go forward for a jury trial, and then a grand jury, which is a process where 16 members of Jefferson County, for example, would determine whether the case goes to a jury, and a petite jury, which we put in the box like you do in the civil cases, and then the jury trial. After that, if you're not successful at the jury trial, there's appellate process for that.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about probably what Brett is, part of what he does is negotiating resolutions and lesser charges for people, working with district attorneys, working with federal prosecutors. That's kind of an important component to what he just went through, and we went through the process, but I want to talk about the background of how he negotiates a lot of those things and works with prosecutors to be able to help his clients.
Good deal. Stepping aside, our final break of the evening, a quick reminder, would love to have you join our conversation, ways you can do so right there. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. When you serve on a jury, you might expect to have all of the evidence presented to you during the course of a case. But there are some forms of evidence that are not allowed in court. In tonight's Legal 411, we are answering the question, why can't jurors see police incident reports? Most jurors would like to see crash reports during a trial, especially since these documents almost always show the investigating officer's opinion on who was at fault for the crash. Unfortunately, Alabama law prohibits the introduction of such reports into evidence. Alabama law states that no such accident report shall be used as evidence in any trial, civil or criminal, arising out of an accident. According to lawmakers who wrote and approved this rule, the reason accident reports cannot be admitted as evidence is that a jury might place too much weight on an official document such as a police report. There are some exceptions to this rule, of course, but most courts generally won't allow this type of evidence to be shown to a jury. Despite this rule, police officers who investigate crashes are still allowed to testify. They can tell a jury what they saw at the scene of the crash, including the road conditions and the positions of automobiles. An officer can also inform a jury of most any statement the people involved in the crash may have said to the officer during the investigation. The accident report can even be used to refresh an officer's memory of the crash. But the actual document itself cannot be introduced into evidence, and the officer's opinion of who is at fault is also excluded. That's because the jury is charged with deciding fault based on all the facts presented. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will always respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, talking all about criminal law and knowing your rights tonight on The Attorneys. Hey, a reminder, about 10 minutes remaining in our program, a little less than that. So if you want to take advantage of that opportunity to speak with attorneys from Hollis Wright who are standing by live, take advantage of that. You got about 10 minutes, a little less than that to do so. So don't miss out on that opportunity. Josh?
So when we went to break, Brett, we were talking a little bit about the process that one goes through from the time of an arrest, getting counsel involved, all the way through to trial. I am assuming part of what you do for clients is you attempt to take the crime charged and address whether or not there is an appropriate plea bargain or some type of negotiation that can take place with whether it's a state prosecutor, a municipal prosecutor, a federal prosecutor, to try and resolve that issue for a lesser charge. Is that common in your practice?
Well, when someone comes to my office for a consultation, the first thing we have to do is determine whether the state or the federal government can prove the charges against them. That's crucial. Remarkably, most of the folks that come into my office don't want a trial. They don't want to go to court and be judged on what they are charged with. And those are cases that most likely end in what we call a plea bargain or an agreement. Some folks come into my office and they say, I am not guilty, I did not commit this offense. And literally those are the ones that keep me up at night. Those are the ones that we have to try their case. But the statistics on trials, as it probably is in your world in the civil, there's just not that many trials. Yeah. Most things settle. Most cases settle. And to settle a case or to plea bargain a case, you have to know your case. You have to investigate the case, and you have to work just as hard as you would if you were preparing the case for trial. In fact, I use the preparation for trial in even my plea bargain cases. I want to know more than the prosecutors. So when I sit across the table from the prosecutors, I can point out potential deficiencies in their case and use that to my client's benefit to try to work out something that is satisfactory. Yeah. My old partner taught me a long time ago that if the other side is giving up more than they want to give up and we're giving up more than we want to give up, it's probably the right resolution. Yeah. And I use that as a guideline. Of course, trying to keep folks out of jail and try to minimize the impact on their record are most important.
How do you address the issue? Because I know how I address it in the civil context with reference to money and money damages. How do you address the individual that looks at criminal defense lawyers and says, I don't understand how you can represent individuals that have been, charged with these crimes? And it has not been lost on me. Many innocent people are charged with crimes. I get that. But how do you address that? Is it a process argument? Is it that they deserve their day in court just like anybody else does? It
absolutely does. I mean, our system, as flawed as it may appear to some folks, is the best system in the world. The reason is that back in old times, if the king thought you were guilty, he'd cut your head off. There was no due process, there was no trial, and there was no defense. And we don't want to be in a time where the president or the governor or even the mayor thinks that you're guilty of an offense and has absolute right to take action against you. So the criminal defense system is set up to do just that, to defend the rights, to make sure that folks are afforded due process, and that if they're not guilty, they can be proven not guilty.
Yeah. It's interesting, one of the things that always kind of has charged my batteries in the law is on the criminal side, this concept that we have the burden as high as it is makes it really difficult to get a conviction. But the concept there is to ensure that we don't have innocent people being convicted of crimes. We're willing to allow some maybe guilty people to go free because we have such a high burden. But to me, that's one of the beauties of the system itself. It's not a perfect system like you said, but it's a practical system that does work. We want to make sure that the rights are protected of the innocent, even more so than those that are probably guilty.
And President Abraham Lincoln said it best, I'd rather 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man be put to death. Yeah. And that's something that it does. It charges my batteries too.
All right, so December. Unfortunately, there will be DUIs. It's just Christmas party season, etc. Let's have some tips just related to DUIs associated with kind of the December time frame. it sounds to me, based on my review of just kind of the DUI law, that the penalties have gotten a lot stricter over the last 4 or 5 years with some legislative changes. Is that accurate?
That is, and it's so unfortunate that as enlightened as folks can be right now with social media and other widely populated things such as Uber apps, we're still dealing with a DUI issue. But it is one of those things. There are folks that will not use the app and will not get themselves home safely. What's really tragic is when we're dealing with automotive accidents, and I'm sure you've seen these that DUI drivers are causing. In Alabama, if you cause a fender bender while you're intoxicated, the penalties are much higher. We're looking at felony charges, and of course, we've had in my office murder cases because of homicides in vehicles. These are folks that don't set out to hurt anybody. They're good people, but once you're intoxicated and behind a wheel, the consequences of causing an accident are horrible. Alabama statutes recently have gotten more strict. There's something called an aggravated DUI, which is 0.15% blood alcohol content, as opposed to the 0.08 minimum standard, and it doubles the penalties. It can subject you to an ignition lock where you have to blow into the vehicle to keep it going. And you're looking at double fines and penalties for those type of offenses.
Are there certain jurisdictions in Alabama where if you are a first-time if you have a first-time DUI charge, you have the ability to plead that down to a lower charge?
Well, Alabama doesn't like to use lesser included charges and pleading them down, but many of the jurisdictions that I practice in, for a first offense DUI, if there's nothing egregious, if there's no wreck and there's nothing, particularly ugly about the charge, they can avail themselves of what's called a deferred prosecution program and earn a dismissal. Now, that's not a get out of jail free card. Of course, the prosecutor is typically the gatekeeper that says whether or not you can do that type of program.
A little over a minute remaining. We want to give both of you an opportunity just for a final charge. And Brett, if you would, you go first, please.
Again, this is the season of a lot of cocktail parties and holiday parties. I would urge everyone to be careful and use their best judgment. Law enforcement is always on high alert and with campaigns to stop drunk driving during the holidays. The smartest thing you could do is have a designated driver, or at the very least use an app, Lyft, Uber, something along those lines.
All I was going to say is, we bring Brett on the show for a reason, because he's an expert in the area of criminal law. If you have been charged with a crime, whether you believe you're innocent, whether you think you actually engaged in the conduct but you need proper representation, you want to go to somebody and get to them early. Don't delay. Don't stick your head in the sand, think it's going to go away. It's not ultimately going to go away unless you've got counsel to help you. Brett's a good example of that.
Appreciate the time and advice. A great job from you guys. Thank you as well for being with us tonight. As we wrap things up, the firm of Hollis Wright online, always ready to answer your questions and available to you. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.